"No wheelchairs on my aisle, Grandma. It's tacky." Those were the words my own granddaughter said to me, the girl I raised, just before she banished me to the back of the church for her perfect wedding. She thought I was a frail old woman, a prop to be hidden away. She didn't know that her cruel words would set in motion a chain of events that would end with me owning the very venue she was getting married in. She wanted a perfect aisle. I decided to give her an eviction notice instead. Before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. This is a place where we tell the stories that need to be told. The truths of mothers, grandmothers, and wives who have been silenced, disrespected, and underestimated. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now, let me tell you what they did. My name is Pearl Davis, and at 72 I had come to understand that love is a currency you spend your whole life giving away, hoping in your final years, you have just enough left over for yourself. For me, that love had been poured into one person above all others, my granddaughter Tara. After my own daughter, her mother, passed away from a sickness that took her far too soon, I had stepped in. I had raised Tara from a bewildered, heartbroken girl of 10 into the beautiful, ambitious, and now, I was beginning to realize, completely unrecognizable woman of 28 who stood before me. The setting for my heartbreak was, ironically, a place of breathtaking beauty. Clover Ridge, a sprawling upscale barn venue nestled in the rolling hills of North Georgia, was the place Tara had chosen for her wedding. It was all exposed beams, glittering chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a serene lake. It was also, I knew, ruinously expensive, a fact that had not deterred my granddaughter or her equally status-hungry fiancé, Luke. Tonight was the rehearsal dinner. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and catered barbecue. Laughter and the smooth sounds of a live jazz trio drifted through the warm evening air. I sat at a small table a little apart from the main group, my wheelchair a silent, awkward appendage that seemed to take up too much space in their perfect rustic chic world. A recent knee surgery had made me dependent on it, a vulnerability I despised and one that Tara, it seemed, found deeply embarrassing. She was the radiant center of it all, of course, gliding through the room in a white cocktail dress, her laughter a little too loud, her smile a little too bright. She and Luke were the perfect couple, a vision of modern success. And I, her grandmother, the woman who had sold her own treasured antique brooches to help fund Tara's design school tuition, was a problem to be managed. The final act of my demotion came as the wedding planner, a woman with a clipboard and a permanently stressed expression, began to finalize the seating chart for the ceremony the next day. "And Mrs. Davis," the planner said, her pen hovering over the diagram of the aisle, "we have you here in the front pew beside the groom's mother." Before I could even smile, Tara's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the air. "Oh no," she said, walking over, her smile never faltering. "We can't do that. No wheelchairs on my aisle, Grandma. It's tacky." The words, so casual, so cruel, struck me with the force of a physical blow. My disability, my need for this chair, was an aesthetic problem for her. A tacky obstacle in the path of her perfect, Instagrammable wedding procession. Luke, her fiancé, a man whose spine seemed to be made of jelly, just nodded in agreement. "Tara's right, Pearl. It would ruin the visual flow. All our guests will be standing. The pictures," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely, as if the very thought of my wheelchair in his wedding photos was too horrifying to contemplate. The planner, to her credit, looked slightly horrified, but she was paid to please the bride. With a small, apologetic sigh, she took a red pen and drew a large X through my name in the front row. She then scribbled my name in a small box at the very back of the diagram, near the exit signs. Then, to add a final bureaucratic flourish to my humiliation, she slapped a small sticker over it, a sticker that read in bold, unforgiving letters, "Blocked out." I stared at the seating chart, at my name crossed out, discarded, banished. The laughter and music of the party seemed to fade into a dull roar in my ears. I felt a hot, stinging shame creep up my neck. I looked at my granddaughter, at this beautiful stranger who was so concerned with the aesthetic of her wedding that she was willing to publicly humiliate the only mother she had ever known. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. Not there. I simply murmured, "Of course, dear. Whatever you think is best." I turned my wheelchair around and rolled myself out onto the stone terrace, away from the laughter, away from their pitying, uncomfortable glances. The cool night air was a relief on my burning cheeks. tears, hot and silent, finally began to fall. They forgot me. No, it was worse. They remembered me, and they had actively, deliberately hidden me away. I sat there in the shadows, my heart a shattered thing, listening to the sounds of their celebration. Distracted by my grief, I backed my chair up a little too far, and the wheel bumped against something hard. I turned to see a stack of old, forgotten file crates, tucked away behind a large planter. They were dusty, neglected. But the label on the top crate, stenciled in stark black letters, was clear, and it made my breath catch in my throat. Clover Ridge Venue, Bank Foreclosure Notice. A thought, a dangerous, beautiful, and incredibly liberating thought, began to spark in the darkness of my heartbroken mind. They thought they had blocked me out. They had no idea I had just stumbled upon the key to blocking them out of this entire venue permanently. The next morning, the day of my granddaughter's wedding, I woke up in my hotel room with a new, cold clarity. The profound hurt of the previous night was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but it was now accompanied by a sense of righteous, strategic fury. I had spent the night not weeping but thinking. The image of that foreclosure notice, stark and official in the dim light of the terrace, had replayed in my mind. It was a piece of information I was not meant to see, a crack in the perfect facade of this expensive venue, and it was an opportunity. My quiet breakfast was interrupted by a call from Tara. Her voice was artificially bright, the voice of someone trying to smooth over an unpleasantness. "Grandma, I hope you slept well. The car will be there to pick you up at noon. Remember, the ushers will show you to your seat at the back. It's for the best, really. Less fuss." Then came the scolding. "And please," she continued, her voice taking on a sharper, condescending edge, "try not to be emotional today. This is my day. I can't have you causing a scene." I listened to her, this girl whose tears I had dried 1,000 times, and I felt a profound sense of detachment. She was not my granddaughter anymore. She was my adversary. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice a model of meek compliance. "I wouldn't dream of it." As I hung up, my mind flooded with memories, not of her cruelty but of my own sacrifice. I remembered her as a heartbroken 10-year-old, her world shattered by her mother's death. I had taken her in without a second thought, raising her as my own. I remembered her dream of going to design school, a prestigious, expensive art college that was far beyond our means. And I remembered the day I had walked into a quiet, dusty pawn shop, my heart pounding, and had sold my most treasured possessions, my grandmother's antique sapphire brooches. They were the last physical link to my own beloved grandmother, a woman of immense grace and strength. I had watched the pawnbroker, a man with greedy, dismissive eyes, weigh them in his hand, and had sold a century of my family's history to fund 4 years of her future. She had promised then that she would make me proud, that she would never forget what I had given up for her. How quickly she had forgotten. But my thoughts were interrupted by the memory of another scene from the previous night. By the foreclosure crate, I had seen the venue owner, a harried-looking man named Mr. Clover, in a hushed, frantic argument with a man in a sharp suit. I had overheard their words carried on the cool night air. The banker had been merciless. "The balloon payment is due Monday, Robert," he'd said, his voice cold. "Not Tuesday. Not next week. Monday. If you don't have the full outstanding balance wired by noon, the bank will initiate seizure of the property." The full outstanding balance. Bankruptcy. Monday. The pieces were clicking into place. This beautiful venue, the stage for my granddaughter's perfect wedding, was a sinking ship, and it was about to go under. My resolve hardened. I had my own savings, a comfortable life insurance payout from my dear husband's policy, money I had carefully guarded for my own old age for a true emergency. And this, I realized with a chilling certainty, was that emergency. An emergency of dignity, of respect, of a final desperate battle against the casual cruelty of the people I had loved most. As if to add a final, galling insult to my injury, my phone buzzed with a new social media notification. It was a post from Luke, my granddaughter's fiancé. It was a picture of the two of them beaming from the rehearsal dinner. The caption was a knife to the heart. "Tomorrow is going to be picture perfect. So excited to marry this incredible woman. Get ready for an absolutely flawless day. Hashtag no drama, hashtag good vibes only, hashtag no walkers allowed." No walkers allowed. It was a direct, public shot at me, at my frailty, a joke for their friends at my expense. That was it. The last of my hesitation vanished, burned away by the white-hot fire of his smug public disrespect. My fingers, surprisingly steady, flew across my phone screen. I was no longer a grieving grandmother. I was a woman on a mission. I googled the county deed office. It opened, I noted with a grim satisfaction, at 8 a.m. 3 hours before the wedding vows were scheduled to begin. My next call was to my oldest and dearest friend, Regina Cobb. Not just my friend, but my lawyer, a woman whose mind was as sharp as a razor and whose heart was as loyal as they come. "Regina," I said when she answered, my voice quiet but firm, "I need you. Urgently. And I need you to be ready to move very, very fast. I am about to buy a wedding venue. And then I am about to crash a wedding." The dawn of my granddaughter's wedding day broke not with joy, but with the cold, clear light of strategic purpose. While Tara and Luke were likely still sleeping, dreaming of their picture-perfect day, I was already in a taxi, my heart a steady, determined drum against my ribs, on my way to meet my lawyer, Regina Cobb. We weren't meeting at her office. We were meeting at the target's location. At 6:30 in the morning, the Clover Ridge venue was a place of quiet, nervous energy. Delivery trucks were arriving. Florists were unloading buckets of white roses. I saw the venue owner, Mr. Clover, standing on the porch, his face ashen, a cup of coffee trembling in his hand. He looked like a man on the brink of ruin. He was my first target. Regina, ever the formidable presence in her sharp pantsuit, led the charge. She approached him not with threats, but with a quiet, compassionate, and utterly ruthless proposition. "Mr. Clover," she began, her voice calm and professional, "my client, Mrs. Pearl Davis, and I could not help but overhear your financial difficulties last night. We are aware of the balloon payment due on Monday. We are aware of the impending foreclosure." Mr. Clover looked at us, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and disbelief. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "There is no need for pretense, Robert," Regina said, her tone softening slightly. "My client is here to offer you a solution. A way out. A way to avoid a messy public bankruptcy that will destroy your name and your credit for years to come." He stared at her, then at me, a flicker of desperate hope in his tired eyes. "A solution?" "Yes," Regina said. She named a number. The full outstanding balance on his delinquent note, a number I had overheard the banker mention the night before. "My client is prepared to offer you that amount in cash this morning. Enough to satisfy the bank completely. In exchange," she paused, letting the weight of her offer settle, "you will sell her the deed to this property. Free and clear. Today. Before the bank opens." He was stunned into silence. It was a lifeline, a clean, quiet escape from the public humiliation of foreclosure. He would lose his business, yes, but he would walk away with his name intact and his debts paid. "Why?" he finally whispered, looking at me. "Why would you do this?" I met his gaze, my own expression calm, unreadable. "Let's just say," I replied, "that I have a vested interest in the future of this particular venue, and a strong desire to see today's event proceed, under new management." He understood. He nodded slowly, a look of profound, weary resignation on his face. "Get the papers," he said to Regina. "Let's do it." By 8 o'clock, as the sun began to climb into the sky, we were at the county courthouse, a place that smelled of old paper and quiet justice. The deed office had just opened its doors. Mr. Boone, the real estate lawyer Regina had called in for his expertise, had the transfer papers ready. Mr. Clover, looking like a man walking to his own execution, signed where indicated. Then it was my turn. I took the pen, my hand surprisingly steady, and signed my name, Pearl Davis, on the line marked Grantee. The clerk, a woman with a bored expression, took the document, examined it, and then, with a satisfying final thud, slammed a large red stamp onto the page. Recorded. It was done. The Clover Ridge wedding venue, the stage for my granddaughter's perfect day, now belonged to me. Regina grinned, a flash of white teeth. "Ready to be a landlord, Pearl?" I smiled back, a slow, cold smile she had not seen on my face before. "Ready to roll," I replied. Our final stop was a small all-night print shop. Regina had already emailed them the documents. One was a formal, legally binding notice of lease termination for today's event, citing the change of ownership and the new owner's refusal to honor the previous agreement. The other was an email, a simple professional message to be sent immediately to the venue's on-site staff, informing them of the change in ownership and instructing them, under penalty of immediate termination, to comply with all directives from the new owner, Mrs. Pearl Davis, effective immediately. Especially, Regina had added with a wink, those regarding full accessibility compliance. As I sat in the taxi on my way back to my hotel to get ready for the wedding, the legal envelope, my weapon, resting on my lap, I felt a strange sense of calm. The heartbroken grandmother who had been banished to the back pew was gone. In her place was a woman of property, a woman of power, a woman who was about to roll down the aisle and deliver a wedding gift her granddaughter would never ever forget. I arrived at the venue at precisely 2 o'clock, 1 hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The parking lot was already filling with expensive cars, the guests a river of pastel-colored silks and starched collars, all flowing towards the beautifully decorated barn. I did not go with them. I waited in the car, watching my heart a calm, steady beat. My lawyer, Regina, had arrived an hour earlier to liaise with the staff. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. At 2:30 I finally made my move. I did not go to the side entrance to the back pew where I had been assigned. I had the car service drop me off at the main entrance, at the very beginning of the long, beautifully decorated center aisle. I got into my wheelchair, my legal envelope resting on my lap instead of a bouquet, and I began to roll. The guests, already seated, turned to look, their faces a mixture of confusion and pity. Look at the poor old grandmother, their eyes seemed to say. Making her way down the aisle all by herself. Halfway down, the wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a permanently frantic expression, darted out to intercept me. "Mrs. Davis," she hissed, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "What are you doing? Your seat is in the back. You can't be on the aisle, you'll ruin the bride's entrance." I just smiled at her, a serene, beatific smile. "Oh, I believe you'll find that I can be wherever I please," I said softly. Before she could protest further, a young man from the venue staff, the on-site manager, quickly stepped to her side. "Ma'am," he said to the planner, his voice firm, "please leave Mrs. Davis be. We have received new instructions from the new owner. This event is to be in full compliance with all accessibility requests." The planner stared at him, then at me, her face a mask of baffled fury. She had no authority here anymore. Defeated, she scurried away. I continued my slow, deliberate journey down the aisle, the soft whir of my wheelchair the only sound in the now silent, whispering chapel. Every eye was on me. I saw my granddaughter Tara's new in-laws, their faces tight with disapproval. I saw my own family members, their expressions a mixture of shock and embarrassment. They thought I was making a scene, a pathetic, desperate bid for attention. They had no idea. I reached the front of the chapel, the altar, decorated with an obscene abundance of white roses. And there they were. My son-in-law, Luke, looking nervous and uncomfortable in his tuxedo. And my granddaughter, Tara, a vision in white, her face a thundercloud of pure, unadulterated rage at my defiance. She took a step towards me, her smile a tight, venomous slash. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice a low hiss, "what do you think you are doing? You are embarrassing me. You are ruining my perfect day." I did not answer her. I simply stopped my wheelchair directly in front of her, at the very spot where she was to take her vows. I reached down, picked up the legal envelope from my lap and held it out to her. "Happy wedding day, my dear," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying through the silent, watching chapel. "I believe this is for you." She snatched the envelope from my hand, her eyes blazing with a furious contempt. She thought it was a card, perhaps a last-ditch sentimental plea. She ripped it open with a vicious, angry gesture. And then she read it. I watched her face as her eyes scanned the cold, hard legal text. I watched the arrogant fury drain away, replaced by a slow, creeping wave of disbelief. I watched her pupils dilate with a dawning, panicked horror. I watched as her hands began to tremble, the paper shaking. And I watched as the full, catastrophic weight of what I had done finally, blessedly, crashed down upon her. The document she held was not a wedding card. It was a legally binding notice. Lease cancelled. Event permit void. Vacate the premises immediately. She looked up from the paper, her face as white as her dress, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at me, at her quiet, unassuming grandmother in the wheelchair, and she finally understood. I was not a guest at her wedding. I was not an embarrassment to be hidden away. I was the owner of the very ground she stood on. And I had just evicted her from her own fairy tale. The moment after Tara read the notice was a masterpiece of silent, suspended horror. The jazz trio, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, faltered, their music dying with a sad, questioning note. The guests stared, a sea of confused, whispering faces. And Tara, my granddaughter, just stood there, the eviction notice trembling in her hand, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Then chaos erupted. The first to react was the wedding planner. She snatched the document from Tara's numb fingers, her eyes scanning the legal jargon with a frantic, dawning terror. "This can't be right," she shrieked, looking wildly from me to the venue manager, who was now standing grim-faced by the door. "We have a contract. Everything is paid for." "Your contract," the manager replied, his voice flat and unapologetic, "was with Clover Ridge LLC. As of 8:15 this morning, Clover Ridge LLC is no longer the owner of this property. Your contract is void. And the new owner," he gestured towards me sitting serenely in my wheelchair, "has requested that you and your clients vacate the premises. Immediately." That was the signal. It was as if a dam had burst. The professional veneer of the event collapsed into a frantic, panicked scramble. The caterers, who had been setting up the champagne towers for the reception, immediately started wheeling their carts back towards their trucks. Their contracts, I knew, were with the venue, not with the bride. With the venue's permit for the event now void, they had no obligation and no financial incentive to stay. The florists began to yank the enormous, ostentatious centerpieces from the reception tables, their faces grim. The jazz trio started packing up their instruments with a speed I found almost comical. Luke, Tara's spineless fiancé, finally found his voice. He rushed to my side, his face pale with a sweat of pure panic. "Oh, Mrs. Davis, please," he stammered. "You can't do this. It's our wedding day. Think of the guests. Think of the money we've spent." I looked up at him, my expression one of calm, detached interest. "I am thinking of the money, Luke," I said quietly. "A great deal of it, in fact. The money I spent on my granddaughter's education. The money I spent helping you two with your first apartment. The money that gave you the very foundation you now stand upon, a foundation you both seem to have forgotten." I then offered him my own modest proposal. "I will consider allowing the ceremony to proceed," I said, my voice clear and steady, "on two conditions. First, my granddaughter will stand before this entire assembly, take this microphone, and offer me a full public apology for her cruel, disrespectful behavior. And second," I added, my gaze sweeping across the front pews, "you will provide proper accessible seating for every single elderly guest here today, right here in the front row where they belong." Tara, who had been standing in a state of catatonic shock, finally snapped. Her face, which had been pale with horror, now flushed with a furious, narcissistic rage. "No," she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly thing that echoed through the half-dismantled chapel. "I will not. This is my day. My perfect day. I will not have it ruined by her or by a bunch of ugly wheelchairs. It will ruin my Instagram aesthetic." Her words, so shallow, so profoundly selfish, so utterly devoid of remorse, sealed her fate. The last flicker of my grandmotherly love for her died in that moment. I looked at the venue manager and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was my signal. The lights in the chapel cut out, plunging the room into a sudden, shocked twilight. The sound system died with a sad, fizzling pop. And from the back of the room, a uniformed sheriff, whom my lawyer had arranged to have on standby for just such an occasion, began to walk slowly, deliberately down the aisle. "All right, folks." His voice boomed, calm and authoritative. "The event is over. The permit for this gathering has been revoked by the property owner. I'm going to have to ask you all to please vacate the premises in an orderly fashion." The guests, their confusion now turning to a delicious, scandalous understanding, began to file out, their phones held high, recording everything. And as they left, the only sound that remained was the sound of my granddaughter, Tara, the beautiful bride, shrieking, a raw, impotent, and deeply satisfying wail of a spoiled child who had just had her favorite, most expensive toy taken away from her. The video of her meltdown, I had a feeling, would be all over social media by morning. Her picture-perfect day had indeed become a viral sensation. Just not the one she had planned. The week following the wedding that wasn't, was a quiet, satisfying whirlwind. As I had predicted, the videos of Tara's spectacular meltdown at the altar, juxtaposed with my own quiet, dignified presence in my wheelchair, had become a local viral sensation. The story, framed by online commentators as a tale of profound elder disrespect and satisfying karmic justice, had turned me into an unlikely local hero and my granddaughter into a pariah. The hashtag don't disrespect grandma's wheels trended for 3 days. The first thing I did as the new sole owner of the property was to meet with my lawyer Regina and my friend Harriet. We didn't just own a venue, we had an opportunity. We immediately began the process of rebranding. Clover Ridge, with its associations of snobbery and my own humiliation, was gone. In its place we established Rolling Meadows, a new company with a new mission. Our venue would be marketed as Atlanta's premier, most beautiful and most importantly, most accessible wedding and event space. We used a portion of the funds from my savings to make immediate, significant upgrades. We installed elegant, permanent ramps alongside the stone steps. We renovated the restrooms to be fully ADA compliant. We widened doorways. We created a special, beautifully appointed quiet room for elderly guests who might need a moment of rest during a long event. We turned a place of exclusion into a haven of inclusion. Our first booking came from a young military bride whose father, a veteran, had lost both his legs in service. She had wept during our initial meeting. "I thought my daddy would have to watch my wedding from the back of the room," she'd said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to us." On her wedding day, I watched as her father, his face shining with pride, rolled down the aisle right beside her, and I felt a joy more profound, more real, than any I had ever expected to feel again. Tara and Luke, of course, did not fare as well. Their public humiliation was complete. The Society magazine that was supposed to feature their perfect wedding instead ran a small, gossipy piece about its spectacular cancellation. Luke's promotion, the one the original dinner party had been for, was quietly rescinded by his firm, who did not want to be associated with a man now infamous for his family's cruel treatment of its own matriarch. Their relationship, built on a foundation of social ambition and mutual arrogance, crumbled under the weight of their public disgrace. They broke their engagement a month later. I did not gloat. I did not need to. My victory was not in their ruin, but in my own quiet, purposeful creation. I took my share of the profits from Rolling Meadows, which, thanks to its unique mission and the good press, was now one of the most sought-after venues in the state, and I established a charitable fund. A small portion of every wedding booked would now be donated to spinal injury research and to organizations that provided mobility aids for low-income seniors. One sunny afternoon about a year after my quiet acquisition, I was at Rolling Meadows, watching another happy couple take their vows. I was no longer the owner hidden in the back. I was a celebrated, respected part of every celebration, the matriarch of a place built on love and respect. I sat in my wheelchair at the top of the new, gently sloping ramp that led down to the main aisle, a path now wide enough for anyone. The hydrangeas I had planted were in full bloom, their colors a vibrant testament to new growth. I watched the young bride and her father, both of them beaming, make their way down the aisle, an aisle that was now truly for everyone. And I thought of my granddaughter, of her cruel, thoughtless words, "No wheelchairs on my aisle." I had not just proven her wrong. I had taken her ugly, exclusionary vision and had transformed it into something beautiful, something inclusive, something that honored the dignity of every single person, regardless of their age or ability. I smiled, a real, genuine, and deeply peaceful smile. She had tried to banish me from her aisle. Now every aisle was mine to roll. And every life I touched, every new couple who celebrated their love here, was a testament to the fact that true beauty, true strength, is not about a perfect aesthetic. It's about a perfect heart.